Okay, so welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Look Mom, No Hands. I'm going to show you how to set up Windows deployment services so you can install operating systems while playing World of Warcraft. It's a great and wonderful thing, and so let's talk about what's going to be in this video. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about how Windows deployment services can really make you a happy camper as an IT administrator. This thing is really nice and can allow you to install multiple operating systems on multiple machines, virtual or physical, in a very short amount of time. And then I'm going to show you how to set up WDS in like 3 easy steps. I mean, literally, it's like 3 easy steps. So I'll show you how to get that done. And then we're going to build some servers. I mean, we're going to turn right around as soon as we have our WDS server all the way set up. We're going to actually create our servers. Let's talk about what we're actually going to be building. This is what we have done so far with our last round. We actually have Hyper-V set up. We've set up our deployment server. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add in some additional servers. We're going to add in a virtual machine for our web server, a virtual machine for our media server, and a virtual machine for our terminal services server. Again, we're going to be creating all virtual machines. So once we have the virtual machine set up, and you saw how easy it is to set up a virtual machine last video. So we're going to create these 3 virtual machines, and then we're going to install Windows Server 2008 on all 3 machines all at the same time. Okay? Now, let's talk about Windows deployment services. First of all, Windows Server 2008 and Vista are both what we call image-based installations. And really an image is just a copy of a hard drive. That's really all it is. And we store that copy of the hard drive as a file on a server, and then we deploy it. We can deploy it via broadcast to several machines all at once. And of course, we can also do this with Vista because Vista has the exact same kind of installation type. And if we want to, we can install singular copies of Vista or multiple copies of Vista all at once. Now, if you've ever used Symantec Ghost or Altiris, or there's several different image-based installation systems out there. Windows Deployment Services is actually very similar to that. All right, so I wanted to just kind of give you a framing for what this technology is if you've worked with this in the past. If you haven't seen it, don't worry about it because I'm going to show you how fantastic this technology is and how much time it's going to save you. So let's talk about how to set up a Windows deployment server in like 3 easy steps. So first of all, we need to take our deployment server, the box or the virtual machine that's actually going to be that deployment server, and it must be joined to the domain. If your Windows deployment server is not joined to the domain, it's not going to play nice, okay? It's going to give you a little error message and say, this machine is not joined to the domain. Then, all we have to do is install the WDS role, and you know how easy that is by now. Then, here's the thing that we have to kind of take a little bit of time to do, okay? We need to add images from the Windows 2008 installation disk. Now, you might also be adding installation images from the Vista disk if you're going to be deploying Vista as well with this machine. So you'll need to add 2 images from the sources folder on the installation disk, either the Server 2008 or the Vista disk. And here they are, the boot.wim and the install.wim. Okay, now the boot.wim, what it does is it actually allows you to boot up the blank machine into deployment services mode. Okay, the install.wim contains the actual operating system that you're going to be installing. Now, big note here, if you're planning on deploying both 32-bit and 64-bit editions, you need to grab the WIM files from both the 32-bit and the 64-bit disks. And that also includes the boot.wim. All right? If you want to install a 32-bit edition of Server or Vista, then you need to get the 32-bit.wim file off of the 32-bit edition disk. Okay? If you want to install the 64-bit edition, you need to grab the boot.wim for the 64-bit. All right, so if you're going to be installing both types, then you need to make sure that you have both boot.wims. And of course, no brainer, you also need to make sure you have the install.wim as well for both editions. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and move on over to the Hyper-V server. We're going to start configuring the Windows deployment server that we set up initially the last video so we can deploy the rest of these machines for Globomatics. All right, so here we are over on the Hyper-V machine, And here is our Windows deployment server machine that we initially set up. And basically, I haven't done anything with it since the last video. So let's go ahead and click on the Control-Alt-Delete, and let's log in as the administrator. Now, I'm logging in as the local administrator right now because I have not yet joined this virtual machine to our domain. Okay, now you know what? I'm going to go ahead and maximize this window so it's a little easier to see. And again, you notice that it looks kind of like we're looking at it through the remote desktop window, which we kind of are. All right, so what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and we're going to configure the networking for this machine. Right now, our IP address is assigned via DHCP. Now you notice here that I did turn off IP version 6 because we're not on an IP version 6 network. I'm going to go ahead and open up the IP version 4 stuff here, and we're going to make sure that we are looking at all of the right address schemes here. I think I'm going to make this machine .12, and the subnet mask is figured for me automatically. My default gateway is 192.168.5.1. That's actually the address of my router. And my preferred DNS server is 168.5.2. That's actually the domain controller that also is currently acting as my DNS server. Now I need to make sure that I'm pointing to a DNS server that knows how to get to the domain controller, and since it actually is the domain controller as well, this is a good bet. All right, I'm going to tell this OK, and we're going to go ahead and finish that out. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and close this window. Let's go back to the initial configuration tasks. I'm going to go ahead and provide a computer name and a different domain here, so let's go ahead and make the changes all at once. This is going to be named deploy1, whoops, there we go, dash, we'll name it Globo so we know that it does belong to our domain. And now for the domain here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add it to the Globomantics domain. And now I'll go ahead and I'll tell it OK, and let's see if we can find that domain. There we go. This is the window that I always like to see. So now we're going to go ahead and log in with the administrator credentials. And that should allow us to join this new WDS server that we're building to the domain. We are going to have to reboot the machine. So, of course, while the machine is rebooting, I will be pausing the video. But again, if you do not join your server to the domain that you're going to use for Windows deployment services, it's going to be angry with you. All right? And we want to keep the machines happy if it's at all possible. All right, there we go. That's what we were hoping to see. Welcome to the Globomantics domain. We'll tell it OK. And hey, gee, we have to restart the computer. Well, okay. Let's go ahead and let's do that here real quick. And again, we're just restarting the virtual machine. So I'm going to pause the video while this guy reboots, and it'll be right back as soon as it comes back up. Okay, there we go. Our server is done rebooting here. Let's go ahead and let's do a Control-Delete. But you know what we need to do? We need to shrink this down a little bit and hit this Control-Delete button rather than use the keyboard. Right now, it's initially going to try to have me log in as the administrator for the local machine, deploy1. Now I don't want to do that, so I'm going to click on Switch User, and I want to log in as the Globomantics administrator here. So that way I get all of the advantages for the domain level administrator, really the enterprise level administrator at this stage in the game. All right, there we go. Let's go ahead and maximize this so we can see everything that's happening on the virtual machine again. We have successfully set up our networking, successfully established our computer name and the domain name. Now, at this point in time, it's probably a good idea to enable automatic updating. However you want to do this, again, this is really your call how you want to establish Windows automatic updating. I'm going to go ahead and use the default settings for the time being, and I may change those later on, but use the defaults. You know, grabbing the updates automatically. Actually, the U.S. Air Force does this. All right, they actually grab any new updates immediately as soon as they come out, and if something breaks, they can always roll back any update that they need to. So if it's good enough for the U.S. Air Force, it's good enough for me. You know what? I should probably download and install any new updates right now. But you know what? I think I'm going to allow the automatic updater do this at 3 a.m. All right. So, looks like let's go ahead and start and grab some of those anyway. Well, that's okay. We can go ahead and continue to do work, even though it's going to go ahead and install those updates. Let's go ahead and let's add the WDS server role right now. All right, I'm going to go ahead and skip the initial page by default every time. I don't like seeing that every time I'm going to add a new role, even though this machine is probably only going to have one role, just so you know. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and install Windows Deployment Services here. Looks like it's taking a little while for this to react. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel this update. I think it is going to kind of interfere with my tasks. So we'll go ahead and we'll stop the updates for the time being. So that way we can get this WDS installed in a reasonable amount of time. Now it is going to talk to you here about what you are going to need in order to use WDS. And it does talk to us about how we do need to run the Deployment Services Configuration Wizard. That's a piece of cake. I'll show you how to do that. And we also need to add at least one boot image and one install image. Talk to you about that, and I'll show you how to do that in just a bit here. All right, to install Windows operating systems from the Windows Deployment Server, either the client must be PXE enabled. That's pronounced PXE, by the way. And PXE is basically the ability for a computer to be able to boot up from its network card. Okay. Now we're going to be deploying our machines, deploying our operating systems to virtual machines, which are PXE enabled. So we don't have to worry about that. That's already set up for us. And you know what? It's pretty tough to find machines that are not PXE enabled anymore. If you have an older server or an older machine you're deploying to, then that's a different story. But most of our machines that you're going to buy off the shelf today are already PXE enabled, so no worries. I'm going to go ahead and tell it next. Now, let's take a look at these two options. There are two options here. We have the deployment server, which provides the full functionality of Windows deployment services. With this one, we can create and customize images. Now, the transport server, let's go ahead and select that guy here. This provides a subset of WDS, and most of the time we're not going to use this as a standalone. Okay, the transport server is only if you want to transmit data using multicasting, but you don't want to use anything else. Chances are in most organizations you're going to use both at the same time on the same machine. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to tell it next. And now it's going to tell me that the server might need to be restarted after the installation completes. Well, let's go ahead and let's complete the installation and let's see how we do. It might take a little bit to install this role, so I'm going to pause the recording, and as soon as it comes back, then I'll start recording again. All right, so you see that the WDS role has successfully installed. Let's go ahead and let's close out of this. Now I'm going to go ahead and close out of the initial configuration tasks here and open up into Server Manager, where we can get into the rest of what we need for the deployment services stuff. I'm going to go ahead and expand the roles section here. And here is my Windows Deployment Services role. I'll expand that. And let's take a look here. Yeah, looks like if I expand this, you see that little warning icon there? It tells us that this machine is not yet configured. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the action menu with Deploy One Globo selected here. And let's select Configure Server. And this is kind of a strange little wizard. I'm not entirely sure I understand why we're doing this, why this doesn't run automatically. But this little wizard, I'm going to tell it next. It's going to ask me where do I want to store any of my images that I'm going to be creating. Well, I'm going to go ahead and leave them at the default here, C/install on the virtual machine. If you have a separate volume or storage device that you want to store all your images on, you can put them pretty much wherever you like. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it next. It's going to tell me that the volume selected is also a Windows System volume. We recommend that the remote installations folder be placed on a separate volume and, where possible, on a separate disk from the system volume. Okay, that's probably a really good idea, because if your system volume has a meltdown, then you won't lose all of your images. Okay. Now, since I only have one hard disk configured on this particular virtual machine, I'm going to go ahead and leave this as it is. All right, now it's going to ask me, how do I want the WDS server to respond? Do I want to have it not respond to anything right now? And by the way, this is probably maybe what you want to have it set on unless you're actively doing deployment at that moment. Do we want to respond to only known client computers, or do we want to respond to all known and unknown client computers? Well, see, at this stage of the game, I'm going to be installing to machines that are not known clients, okay? And since they're not known clients, if I use respond only to known client computers, well, I won't be able to use my deployment services for machines that are brand new. Okay? Now, one thing that you can do if you're really concerned about security and making sure that you're not handing out operating systems to random machines or accidentally installing Windows Server 2008 over the top of someone's Vista workstation, well, what you can do is you can put a check mark here for unknown clients, notify administrator, and respond after approval. What this does, it allows you as the administrator to be alerted to say that a particular machine has requested deployment services, and then you get to decide whether or not to actually send that operating system to that machine or not. Now, I'm going to go ahead and leave this unchecked for now. It is kind of handy if you have a large network, but for right now, since I only have a very small network of only a few machines, this is going to be sufficient enough for the demonstration. So now I'm going to click on Finish. And again, like I said, this wizard, there's really not much to it. I mean, it's a couple of screens, and you can change any of those configurations, by the way, later on. Okay, so congratulations, the wizard has successfully configured WDS on your computer. Now we need to add images. So do we want to add images now? Sure, why not? Let's go ahead and click on Finish. And the Add Image wizard will pop up here for us. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the Browse button. And we're going to go to the, oh, wait a minute, DVD drive, integration services setup. That's not what I want. I need to get to the physical DVD drive because I have a Windows Server 2008 installation disk in that drive. So I'm going to cancel out. I'm going to reduce the size. I'm going to restore down for this server. I'm going to go to Action. Actually, online. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Settings here. And now in the settings for WDS server, I'm going to come down here to the DVD drive. And you see right now that my DVD drive is actually using an image file, vmguest.iso. Now that's not what I want to happen. I want it to use the physical CD DVD drive, which is drive D. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and tell this guy OK. And now I'm going to, let's go back in here into computer, and there we go. Okay, here's the DVD drive. So now I'm going to go ahead and open up the DVD drive here and on the installation disk, and I'm going to go into the sources folder. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and select that sources folder and tell it OK. And now I'm going to tell it next. It's going to ask me to create an image group. Now this is a really good idea, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of deployments from this server. All right, now really an image group, all it really is just a folder. All right, I just want you to think of an image group as a folder. It's really there for your own convenience. All right, so we're going to call this Server 2008 64-bit. All right, and you see it's going to be pulling the images from the sources folder. They're going to be putting them into the Server 2008 64-bit image group folder for us. There is 1 boot image and 6 install images. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and click on Next. And now what it's going to do is it's going to go over to my DVD drive. It's going to grab the images that are in the source folder for me automatically. Now this is going to take a while, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. As soon as it gets done grabbing those images, I'll come back and I'll show you which images it's grabbed, whether or not we want all of them or not, and take us on to the next step. All right, hey, there we go. So the images were successfully added to the server. Let's click on Finish, and let's see what we ended up with, okay? First of all, let's take a look at the boot images folder here. And there we go. We see here that we have an image name, Microsoft Windows Longhorn Setup 64-bit edition. And just so you know, you probably know this already, but just in case you don't, Longhorn was the code name for the Windows Server 2008 stuff. And it is online, and it tells us, here, let's turn off this actions palette here. It tells us the size of it, it's about 442 megabytes, and the date that it was added, and the version of the operating system. Pretty nice, huh? Let's take a look in the install images now. Now remember how we created that image group earlier? Now, an image group contains the actual operating systems. Okay, the boot image, I want to go back and remind you again that the boot image only allows the machine to boot up so that you can install the server. The actual install images are the actual operating system that you want to install. Now you see here that when I used that wizard, it actually grabbed all 6 versions of Server 2008 that were available to me on that DVD. Now if I decide that, you know what, I don't think I'm going to be using like Server Data Center Core, if I'm not using that, I can actually go ahead and delete that image. It's not going to do me any damage to delete an image that I don't need, and quite frankly, it's probably going to be a really good idea to do that to save on your disk space, okay? All right, so we have these images, we have the boot images. Well, we're ready to go, okay? I mean, we have set up everything that is necessary so that we can start using Windows Deployment Services. Now, one quick note, okay? On the boot images, there is a boot image that is also available on the Vista disk. Do not use it, okay? Do not use the Vista install.wim file. Let me tell you why. When you use the install.wim file from Vista, you can only do single machines at one time. The Server 2008 install image that you see that I've selected here, that I grabbed from the DVD, can be used with Vista. Here's a kind of well-known secret. Vista and Server 2008 share a massive amount of the same code base, except when we start getting into into some deeper functionality. But there's a lot of shared code between the two, so we can install Vista using the installation item, the installation.wim file from the Server 2008 disk. And as a matter of fact, if you want to install Vista to, say, 64 machines all at once, well, then you can do that using the Server 2008 install.wim. You cannot install 64 Vista clients all at once using the Vista install image. Why? I have no idea. Okay, just so you know. I do know, however, that if you want increased functionality for both Server 2008 and for Vista, stick with the install image from the Server 2008 disk. Now again, if you're going to be installing a 32-bit edition of Vista, then you need to find a 32-bit edition installation disk for Server 2008. You'll grab the 32-bit install.wim, and let me show you how to do that. What you would do is you would select Add Boot Image, and then you would go to the DVD that you would insert into your DVD drive and grab the 32-bit install.wim. Or I'm sorry, the 32-bit boot.wim from that 32-bit edition of the disk. So if you're going to be installing 64-bit and 32-bit, you need both 64 and 32-bit boot.wim files. I think I have beat that horse until it's dead. So let's go ahead and let's move on now. All right, so we have our server set up here. Let's go ahead and let's minimize it. What we're going to do next is we're going to create 3 additional virtual machines, okay? We're going to be installing Server 2008 on 3 machines all at the same time so we can do something else in the meanwhile. So we're going to click on the New button. I'm just going to create 3 virtual machines really fast, okay? First of all, I'm going to select Do Not Show this page again. All right, so we're going to call this machine Web1. Store this machine in a virtual location. G is going to be fine. Hit Next. 0.5 gig of memory. We'll start with that, but just so you know, we can always change it later. Connectivity, we're going to use the virtual network we created. The virtual hard disk is going to live in that folder. 127 gigs looks good. Hit Next. I'm going to, now this is the stage where I need to stop here because we're going to be installing the operating system. Do I want to install the operating system later? No. What I want to do is I want to install an operating system from a network-based installation server. When you see network-based installation server, think WDS. Okay, so really this is the only step that we really need to pay that close of attention to, at least for our initial setup project here. I'm going to tell it next. I'm going to start the virtual machine after it is created. Okay. We'll click on finish. And there's our Web 1 machine. All right, let's make another one. All right, this guy, we're going to call this guy TS1. We're going to store the virtual machine in a different location. Looks like it remembers my last location. We'll tell it next. 512 megabytes is good enough. Tell it next. I'm going to connect it via my virtual network connection, that shared network. Next. Create a hard disk. I think that's good. We're going to tell it next. Install an operating system from a network-based installation server. Yep. Tell it next. And then finish. There we go. And now it's going to bring that machine up here real quick. Looks like my Web 1, looks like we got a boot failure. Don't worry, we'll worry about that a little bit later. TS1 is up and running. All right, looks like it did grab the Pixie Boot item from the WDS server. Well, looks like we got a boot failure on that one. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of that when we do the installation. Right now, we're just creating machines. You see that we're creating machines pretty fast. All right, we're going to create Media 1 next. Store the virtual machine in a different location. Next, we'll stick with 512 for installation purposes only. Connect it to the virtual network. Look how fast I'm doing this. I mean, seriously. You know, I'm creating virtual machines literally about as fast as I can talk and type. And I could probably do it even faster if I wasn't trying to talk through it. All right, we'll hit finish. And now we have our 3 virtual machines up and running. They are alive. Actually, we have 4 of them, right? Because we have the deployment server. Okay, so looks like Media 1 here is booting up. Come on there, Media 1. Let's go. There we go. Now he's up and going too. Okay, so wow, we got a whole lot of stuff done in a very short amount of time. Now what we need to do is we need to get our WDS server set up so it can install Server 2008 on all 3 of these machines that we just created. So I'm going to go back to the WDS server, and I'm going to go ahead and maximize it here just so we can see everything that's happening. I'm going to go here to Multicast Transmissions. All right, I'm going to right-click and select Create Multicast Transmission. So I'm going to call this one 3 servers, okay, because I'm going to be installing 3 servers with it. Now it's going to ask me which operating system from which image group, and remember, an image group is just a folder, okay? I don't want you to get confused by that term. But which one do we want to install? Server Enterprise, Server Data Center? I think I'm going to stick with Server Enterprise. I like Server Enterprise. So we'll go ahead and we'll use that one, and we will tell it next. Okay, do we want to do an autocast, where multicasting starts automatically as soon as the client machines that we're installing to go ahead and just start downloading and installing stuff, or do we want to schedule a multicast transmission? Well, you know what? I think that we're going to go ahead and we're going to start automatically when the number of clients ready to receive this image is 3. Okay? So here's what's going to happen. When my 3 other virtual machines that I just created connect to the WDS server using that Pixie Boot, and remember, all Pixie Boot is just the ability to boot up from the network card and using information from a network source. So as soon as 3 machines have connected to the WDS server, it's going to go ahead and start installing, or really multicasting, that image to those machines. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to tell it next. I have successfully created a multicast transmission. Did you see how easy that was? I mean, wasn't that insanely easy? All right, let's go ahead and tell it to finish. And now you see that my 3 servers multicast, the status is waiting. All right. When I click right on 3 servers, what's going to show up here are the 3 machines that we are going to connect to the WDS server through basically just booting them up. That's all we're going to have to do. All right, so let's go ahead and let's make this happen. I'm going to shrink this guy down, restore it down real quick. And I'm going to go here to Web 1. All right, so Web 1 looks like I've got a boot failure. Let's click on the Control-Alt-Delete to reboot the machine. And now what I need to do is, as soon as this guy boots up, it's going to ask me to push a button. Okay, press F12. Okay, hitting F12 now. And now what it's going to do, let me scroll down here for a second, it's actually loading up files from our WDS server. All right, let's go ahead and let's do the same thing now for TS1. Let's click on Control-Alt-Delete. Make sure my mouse is over here so the focus is in the window. And then as soon as it prompts me to, I need to press F12 on the keyboard. There we go. Come on. Come on, there we go. And now this machine should be starting to load up Windows. Yep. And now let's do one more time for this machine here. For our Media 1 machine, we need to hit F12 and have it boot up into the network service boot. All right, there we go. And scroll down here, Windows is loading files. Okay, everything is running pretty smoothly right now. It is going to take a little bit for these three machines as I flip through them. Starting with Web 1. Oh, there we go. Web 1 starting to load up. TS1 is starting to load up, and Media 1. And still got a little ways to go. Let's focus back here on Web 1. While this guy is getting ready, let's go back on over to the WDS server, and let's see what we got going on here in our three servers multicast. I'm going to press F5. Looks like they're not showing up just yet because they're all still loading up. So let's take a look here. All right, there we go. Now the one slight drawback is that you do have to be at the machine, at least at some level, at some point in time, in order to walk it through this initial setup process. And I do need to log in with an older style login, globomantic/administrator. There we go. Now it is asking me which operating system that I want. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at Server Enterprise. It's going to install that one anyway. And where do we want to install it at? I'm just going to leave it at that first disk and press the Enter key. All right. Now, my machine is waiting for the WDS server. Let's go over to TS1 and let's see. Yep, we got pretty much the same thing happening over here. Since I'm on my remote desktop session, remember you have to use the keyboard to navigate through this. You can't just click on the screen because we do not have the integration services extensions installed because we don't have an operating system installed just yet. I'm just pressing the Enter key here to move through the screens quickly. Again, we got to do it one more time. And just so you know, there are ways to further automate this process using an answer file. We'll talk about those here in just a minute. But first, we have to do a very basic setup of what we're in the middle of. Okay, so now we should be connecting to all three of the machines to the server here. Looks like they are connecting. All right, let's go over here to our WDS server. Let's press the F5 key to see if we're connecting. Hey, there we go. All right, so we have three machines that we've just set up. They are connected. And so now, basically, these three machines are just hanging out and waiting. We should start installing. There we go. Every time I press the F5 key to refresh the screen, I'm going to get an update on the status of how it's doing. Now, if I come back over here and I see what's actually happening on the machine, looks like we're copying files straight from the WDS server. We are not copying files from the DVD, right? But rather using that install image that's over on the WDS server, we're copying files over to these virtual machines, and the installation process is pretty much going to run as normal from here on out. So you know what this means, don't you? This means that while these machines are actually pulling data from the WDS server, that means we can actually go back on over to our game of Warcraft. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that now. And oh, looks like I got disconnected from the server. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to go back to my game of Warcraft, and I'm going to pause the recording, and then as soon as that thing gets done doing its installation, I'll come back and I'll show you what the end result is. Alright, so I decided to take a break from my World of Warcraft game here just to kind of give you an update here of how things are looking. If you notice here that I've got one client's already dropped off, the status is at 99%. See, it only took about 20 minutes to actually get the files copied over to those machines. Right now you see that we're using machine-generated names for the machine names, and we have DHCP addresses attached to them. Here's their client MAC addresses as well. Now if I go over here to Web 1, let's see how it's doing. Alright, well it's copied all the files from the WDS server, and now the installation process has pretty much taken over and it's just doing the work automatically. Let's take a look at TS1. Yep, looks like we got the same thing. The copying of the files has completed and the installation has taken over. And also on Media 1, yep, we got the same thing. The files have been copied and they are currently expanding and doing the whole installation routine. So wow, let's stop and think about this for a second. I installed 3 servers on my virtual machine in about 20 minutes. I think, what did it take? About 5 minutes to create all 3 of those machines on the Hyper-V server. So I hope you're seeing right now the speed that you can do this stuff at once you have your WDS server in place. And if you're going to be doing Hyper-V stuff a lot, having a WDS server to do your deployment with is really going to speed up your process quite a bit. Now, of course, it is going to take some time for the installation to complete on its own, because you see we're expanding the files that we're still at 1%. So right now we could actually go back to our World of Warcraft game and play around for a while. But these servers will be ready for us in the next couple of videos. I mean, you know what an installation looks like by now, so I'm not going to sit here and pause the video and take you back and show you what a completely installed machine looks like, because you already know that. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's go back on over to the slides now that our task has been complete. By the way, we are going to be configuring these 3 virtual machines in the next few videos as we go along all throughout the course, as we set up each individual machine and we take a look at that particular role for that particular video, okay? So let's do some wrap up and move on. All right, so here is what we have built, all right? We have built our deployment server from scratch over here, and we have also added 3 virtual machines. We have those installing as we speak, so we have them ready for the next several videos. And you saw that it just didn't take that long to get all of this set up. So there's a lot of advantages to using Hyper-V, a lot of advantages to using a deployment server in order to push items out. Oh, you know what? There's one more thing. I want to take you back over to the server for a second. I do want to talk to you for just a moment about unattended installation files, okay? All right, we're back over here on the Hyper-V server, and I just want to take you back in here into the server manager in our deployment server. You see that we don't have any more servers in our 3 servers multicast. So you know what? I could actually just go ahead and delete this guy if I wanted to and get him out of the way. I want to talk to you for a second about unattended installations. You know, initially when we did all of that work, and I say like 3 minutes worth of work for each one of those 3 servers. Well, for 3 servers, that's not a big deal. But let's say that you're deploying, oh, I don't know, like 100 or 200 Vista clients. Do you really want to have to go to each one of those Vista clients and click through a couple times? It's going to take too long. So here's the thing. You can actually right-click on any one of your install images. Now, not your boot image. Okay, this is your boot image over here. We don't want to mess with that. We can go to the install images and attach an unattended installation file to a particular image. So I can right-click on Server Standard here, for instance, go into its properties. Go ahead and pull this guy up here a little bit so you can see him. I can put a check mark here in Allow Image to Install in Unattended mode. Now, in order to do that, though, you need to find a file, or really what you need to do is you need to create an unattended installation file. And I'm going to tell you, that's a little outside of the scope of this course because everybody's going to have different needs for their unattended installation files. But all you would do at this stage in the game is you'd click on the Browse button, you would go find your unattended installation file, and actually there's a basic template here in C Drive Windows System 32 in Server 2008. There's actually a small template down here. I can right-click on this guy and select Edit just so you can see what an unattended file might start off looking like. It's basically an XML file that has very specific sections that you can go in and specify different options and switches for your installation so that you don't have to be at the machine at all. It'll just happen automatically. Now, writing unattended installation files can be a little bit complex. So rather than show you how to write them, because quite frankly, that could be a couple, 2 or 3 hours worth, and that may or may not necessarily be what you want to spend your time on in this course. But if you go over to Microsoft.com, let's see if we can go ahead and get over there here real quick. I want to direct you to where you can find information about unattended installations for Server 2008 and for Vista. All right, we're going to tell that no thanks. And basically just go into the search and we put in unattended file Server 2008, or you could put in Vista, whichever one that you are looking to create. And forgive me for having to go through this whole Microsoft Explorer mess. There we go. We're just going to close that out here. Here we go. There is a Windows Deployment Services step-by-step guide. I'll go ahead and we'll start there. Go ahead and we'll close that out. Okay. I'm going to scroll down here for this one for just a second, and we're going to see if we can find it. Here we go. Performing an unattended installation. You can read up about what is necessary to do the unattended installations here. And also, as I scroll down here, I'm going to find you a link that will take you to another sample unattended installation file. Here we go. Sample unattended files. And go ahead and click here on this one. Once again, since I'm on my server, I have to keep closing out of my security boxes here. Here are some files and some examples that you can use. And literally, you can copy and paste this stuff into basically just a text file, name it .xml, and create a nice, simple unattended file. The items that you'll probably want to pay close attention to are the username, the domain name, and passwords. Initially, I know it might look a little bit like spaghetti, but don't be afraid of this. XML is very simple. It might take you 5 or 10 minutes to sit down, read through the file, see which of these items that you need to change, and actually activate. Some of them you'll need to activate, some of them you will not. Okay? Some of them you can just ignore and delete altogether. But I wanted to at least give you a start if you're going to be working with unattended files. Everybody's going to need a slightly different configuration. So if I would show you how to create one and you would use it and you use it in your network, you're like, well, that didn't work. Well, yeah, it might not necessarily work for your particular situation. So, but I've shown you where to go for it. So hopefully you can take it from there. And if you need to utilize this technology for the unattendeds, it's there and available for you. Okay, back over to the slides now. All right, so let's talk about some big words that are going to help you sound smarter at cocktail parties, okay? First of all, Windows Deployment Services is just a server role that allows easy installation of server and client operating systems using image-based installations. WIM, Windows Imaging Format, the file type used to create and deploy Windows operating systems. PXE, hey, we talked about this. Let me give you a good solid definition. Pre-boot execution environment, pronounced PXE. It's an environment that allows you to boot computers using a network interface independently of available data storage devices like hard disks or install operating systems. A boot image is an image pulled from the Server 2008 installation disk that allows the machine to boot into Deployment Services installation mode, and an install image is an image file that contains the actual operating system that you want to install. Remember that those two are separate, and you need to add both. Don't forget also that you also need to include boot and install images for both 32-bit and 64-bit editions of Server and Vista. Okay? All right, so after viewing this video, you should be able to install the WDS server role, should be able to add boot and installation images to the WDS server from the Server 2008 installation disk, and you should be able to describe why you should only pull the Server 2008 boot image rather than the boot image from the Vista installation disk. Remember that one of the big advantages to using the boot.wim from Server 2008 is that you get to do multicasting, and there's all kinds of other advantages to it as well. But the general rule is do not use the boot.wim from the Vista disk with WDS. It's not that it won't work, it's just that you'll only be able to do one machine at a time. And also, by now you should be able to deploy Server 2008 to multiple machines by creating a multicast transmission. You saw how easy that was, right? I mean, there was really nothing to that. And you saw that there were actually two options. One, it just automatically starts installing from any machine that loads up into the Pixie boot. But you also saw that we can control how many machines are actually going to get that new operating system that we're going to be multicasting and broadcasting over the network, okay? All right, so we have built our servers. We've seen how to use WDS for easy installation. Let's go ahead and let's move on to the next video.